for tuning into No Wine in No Time. I'm your host Dave, and today we're going to discuss dessert wines. So dessert wines are a classification of sweet wines that offer significantly more than just sweetness. So let's talk about that a little bit and talk about how these different wines are made. So initially, the wine starts in the vineyard itself. So let's think about when grapes become ripe. When grapes become ripe, sugar reaches its peak level and it's balanced by acid. So when we think about grapes being ripe, they are ready to harvest at that point. So along with sugar, there also is water, tannins, and acid as the four main components of a grape itself. So how do we raise the sugar content and in turn intensify the flavor of the resultant wine? Well, we can do that by removing some of the water itself. And there's several different techniques that lead us to get to that point. So the first and the easiest technique is to take a wine and just harvest the grapes much later than we would normally. So think about it. The grapes are sitting on the vines themselves, and those grapes are plump. They're full of juice, they're full of sugar, they're full of acid, they're well balanced, everything's perfect. If we pick them, we create a normal type of wine. If we let the grapes themselves sit on the vine and actually raisin a bit, what we've done is desiccate or actually remove some of the water from the grapes themselves. And that can be done naturally by just leaving the grapes on the vine for an extended period of time. So that's one technique. The second way is to remove water through a technique that the Italians call appassamento. So basically what we're doing is picking the grapes when they're ripe and taking them up to the attic of the vineyard and allowing them to dry a bit on straw mats. So that's the foundation that's used to make some of the great wines of the world like Amarone della Val Policello, and also something like this dessert wine called Recioto, which we'll get back to in just a minute. Another way of desiccating the grapes is allowing nature to do that for you. So in the area of southern Bordeaux, there's a phenomena known as noble rot. And noble rot, it doesn't sound very appetizing, but it's actually when the grapes themselves are acted upon by a fungus by the name of Botrytis cinerea. And that also doesn't sound very appetizing, but it's a harmless fungus, and basically what it does is it desiccates the grapes through fungal interaction. And those grapes end up being significantly sweeter, higher in acid, but lower in water. And they're the basis for one of the world's most classic dessert wines, one called Sauterne. So Sauterne uses Botrytis grapes, specifically Semillon and Sauvignon Blanc, to produce this really world-renowned type of dessert wine. So let's talk about the king of all dessert wines, and that's one called ice wine. So ice wine comes to us from areas like Austria, Germany, Canada, for example, maybe upper New York State, places that get hard freezes. And to be a dessert wine, technically, those grapes need to reach -8 degrees Celsius for a 24-hour period. So they need to be picked frozen, they need to be pressed frozen. So let's think about what gets us to that point. So in the northern hemisphere, when are we starting to get cold? When we're starting to get cold in longer stretches, December, January, February. Well, the grapes were ripe in September. So now we're taking a late harvest wine and we're leaving those grapes on the vine for months longer than we would in late harvest. But when the planets line up and we have a -8 degree for a 24-hour period stretch, and those grapes freeze solid, we pick them and we create an ice wine. Now the beauty of ice wine, and why I say it's kind of the king of dessert wines, these grapes are so desiccated, or the water's removed, and all the flavors are so intense that most ice wines result in about 10% of the volume they would have if the wine was made when the grapes were ripe. So that's incredible. Think about removing so much water that all you have left is beautiful acid, tannin, and sugar. You create a wine that's so incredibly intense. So, no talk about dessert wine would be complete without talking about fortified wines, which leads us to this vin du naturel. And this is a technique that's used in the southern part of France, and also it's the basis for what we use in port wine production. Now, port wine production is a whole nother subject, but let's talk about vin du naturel. So vin, wine, du, sweet, naturel. So basically what we're doing is taking a late harvest wine, fermenting it very lightly, and then allowing us to fortify the wine with a neutral grape spirit. So basically we're taking a wine that maybe has 2% alcohol, very low alcohol because we didn't ferment it that long. We left all the sweetness behind. Then we added a neutral grape brandy to fortify the wine to raise its alcohol content. So let's review here for a second. Vin du naturel, fortified dessert wine. Sauterne, a botrytis enacted upon wine where the desiccation actually comes from a fungus in the field itself. A recioto, this is done with the Italian technique called appassamento, or the drying of the grapes. And ice wine, where the grapes have to freeze to -8 degrees Celsius for a 24-hour period. Now, I opened a recioto just to kind of familiarize you with what you can expect from all of these. Now, they vary a little bit, but it's pretty similar. And the first thing we see when we look at a recioto is made 100% from Garganega grapes, and this little gem's from Sicily. First thing we notice is it's liquid gold in the glass. I mean, it is absolutely beautifully golden. And if we swirl to liberate the aromas, the first thing we smell coming out of the glass is almost fig jam with a little bit of citrus and almost a nutty type of aroma like hazelnuts. Really fantastic. And let's go ahead and taste the wine. Now, across the palate, while this wine is certainly sweet and a dessert wine, it is incredibly balanced in the background by a beautiful acidic stripe and really a nice little bit of firm tannins on the backside. Now, this particular wine gives us almost like a floral, candied citrus. So think like some of the fruit that's in a fruit cake. Buttered hazelnuts or buttered almonds. All these flavors come screaming as this rolls across the palate. Really just absolutely beautiful. So what's the application for these wines? If we had some really ripe or overripe melons, you could cut those up and enjoy a dessert wine with it. But a little more traditionally, think pairing with creme brulee. Think a piece of cheesecake without any fruit on it. Think things like flan, really beautiful pairings with these type of dessert wines. So I'm going to enjoy a little bit more recioto. That's all the time we have for today. So thanks for tuning in, and please tune in next time, and soon you'll know wine in no time.